Hello BookTube, it's Ben here from the History Fella channel, back with a video, and this one is the top 10 history books I've read this year in 2022. Now this is not going to be some definitive list that, kind of everyone agrees on. This is purely the books that I've read this year and thoroughly enjoyed. I've probably read about maybe certainly over 200 books this year. So this is kind of my top 10 books of the year. What you'll see is a picture of the front cover of each book will appear about here, hopefully. The reason for that is because obviously some of the books I end up passing on to friends to read or lend out, and if they're a good book, I'll more than likely lend them out to friends and relatives. So I don't actually have every copy here. Some of them are out on loan. So hopefully the pictures will appear about here so that you can get a good view of each book. So anyway, let's get going. The first book on the list, number 10, is called Middlesbrough at War. It's part of the Towns and Cities series of books from Pen and Sword that features a town or a city, obviously during the Second World War, and it tells you about how that city fared during the war. But it's not about the it doesn't list what actually happens on the battlefront and that. It tells you what happens back home in the UK and what happens in that particular city. Usually down to, it's mainly local history it concentrates on, but it tells you all about the local organisations or charities, specific members of that city that have done well during the war. They may have received awards and that sort of thing. And it's just generally a really good book, and the whole series for me is a brilliant book that looks at local history, and it's a really good read. And of all the books that I've received, I can't fault any of them, and they're written by some first class authors. So number 9 on my list is Sniper on the Ypres Salient, back to the First World War. And like the title says, it's about snipers, kind of recollections and diaries and primary source evidence about this fellow who's joined up in the army, then moves on to become a sniper. And it's really interesting read. He's very observant, if I remember rightly, and you kind of understand why he is a sniper, because he notices all things in great detail and that sort of thing, and it's a really good read. The next book on the list is called Great Escape Forger, which is about an artist whose daughter's written a book about her father from the Second World War, who was held as a prisoner of war. And whilst he was in the prison camps, obviously one of his strengths was he was a good artist. And he's done some fantastic drawings, and they're dotted around throughout the book, and he's just a really good artist, and it kind of it gives you another dimension to the book and what he had to live through and what he had to endure, and there's quite a few of these things are reflected in his art and his drawings, and it's an excellent read, and it was the artwork that really impressed me. The next book is, I've got my list next to my phone so that I can see the list. The next book on the list is Churchills Convoys. And I quite like the convoy system that they used during World War II, mainly to take goods from America and Britain, and they used to go over the top towards the Arctic, obviously, and then into Russia to provide the goods and raw material to help them build vehicles and weapons in order to fight the Germans from their side. So it looks at many of the convoys that took place and what they had to endure and what happened to them during the convoys, and it's a really good read, quite a riveting read, and I'd highly recommend. And it's kind of one of my subject specialists that I quite enjoy reading about in World War II, and that's the I like prisoner of war camp type stuff and the Arctic convoys. I find them really fascinating. And the next one on the list is, what was it, the sixth book, sorry. Shipwrecks in 100 Objects, again written by Pen and Sword. An excellent book, and I'm getting into naval history. And this book, I've read a few of these 100 Object books, but this one specifically looks at shipwrecks, and it takes an object from a particular shipwreck and tells you how the importance of that object and how it came to be about being there. And it's a book about various attacks on ships from pirates and smugglers, or just strange mishaps or mistakes. And it's a really good book, and it gives you a good social history of shipwrecks throughout the period. And so I found it quite an interesting book, and one that I'm getting quite the subject's really appealing to me. Number 5 on the list is Robert the Bruce. Everyone will know him as a Scottish leader. This particular book was very good, very well written, and kind of like in chronological order. It's an easy read, and I thoroughly enjoyed learning more about Robert the Bruce. And I should obviously say that I quite like my Scottish history as well. The next book is a non-history book, actually. It's called The Brainwashing of My Dad, and I think this came out a few years ago, actually, and it's about this journalist whose dad was, with all his life, had been very much a Democrat based in America, but she'd noticed over sort of like the past 10-15 years, he'd become rather more right-wing and was wondering why, and she'd found that he'd been listening to more and more right-wing shock jock type radio, and it was kind of changing him and his thoughts and his beliefs on life. And it just looks at how he'd gone from being left-leaning and suddenly become rather right-wing in his beliefs. And although this book wasn't about history, it was quite interesting read to see how it was done and what the media was actually telling him constantly that turned him right-wing rather than as a left-wing Democrat. So that's The Brainwashing of My Dad. Now then, that was number 4. The top 3. The third on my list is this book called London, a 14th century history about obviously London and the people and places. I find London history quite intriguing, as London develops quite differently and regularly throughout the centuries. Mostly because it's seen through royalty eyes. You know, if there's a particular king or country on the throne, then you tend to hear about that. But this book's very much about the ordinary person in the street, how life affected them and how they changed through the various, in this particular century, in the 14th century, and what happened. And it looks at things like, you know, housing, social issues, education, health, and everything like that. And it's just a really good read and gives you a good It gives you a good snapshot of life in 14th century London, and it's a really good read. I can highly recommend that one. Now, my number 2 book of the year is Why the Titanic Was Doomed. Another book by Pen and Sword, and I found this book intriguing in that I've always liked reading about the Titanic, how it sunk and what happened to it and all the mistakes that were made. And this particular book looks at all the errors and the mistakes, and that this turned into a tragedy. And I just found the book really fascinating and just intriguing, really, and it really does highlight all the problems that occurred, and kind of, when you read the book, it was doomed from the start. So certainly it was like an accident or a tragedy waiting to happen, and this is my second best book of the year. This is Why the Titanic Was Doomed. And finally, my book of the year, and I actually have the copy in front of me because I'm not going to lend this one out to anybody, and it's a book called Battle: Understanding Conflict from Hastings to Helmand. So goes all the way through since the Battle of Hastings, written by Graham Callister and Rachel Whitbread, published by Pen and Sword Books. Basically, it looks at various battles through British history, and it looks at, for each battle, it takes a specific viewpoint and looks at the leadership, the military command, where it happened, and basically it goes through all these, looks at one strong point through each particular battle that makes the battle stand out. So if I just quickly go, here we go. Chapter 1 looks at society, as in the murder of Isham and Black Week Stormberg. You got strategy and politics for Marston Moore, leadership, how that was involved in hammered by the Scots at Stirling Bridge, and the Somme, where it's called Lions Led by Donkeys. And then on the various other chapters, you've got conditions of landscape, battlefield strategy and tactics, logistics, weapons, armour, armies and personnel, motivation, and the clash of arms and sources of conflict. So basically, the book, or each chapter, looks at various things that are prominent in that battle throughout mainly British history. And it's a really riveting read, and I really enjoyed it. And it's kind of a book that it reminded me very much of when I was at university, and they give you all these books to read, and it's of that standard. So it's a really good read, very well written, and I can highly recommend Battle, which is subtitled Understanding Conflict from Hastings to Helmand, and written by Graham Callister and Rachel Whitbread, published by Pen and Sword Books. And that is my book of the year, 2022. So thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. If you have, feel free to give the video a thumbs up, write some comments. Maybe you might agree with some of the books that I've picked from my top 10. Or if you want, you can tell me your top books of the year as well, especially if they're history related. So other than that, thank you very much. I hope you're all keeping safe and well. Looking forward to Christmas, and keeping warm and keeping healthy. So I shall see you very soon for some more videos this week. And other than that, please take care and have a good time. Thank you very much. See you next time.